Hello and welcome to Cutlery Cavern. I believe everyone has seen these knives somewhere. These are those Indian head feather knives. They go for somewhere between $5 and $10. You can get them just about anywhere: eBay, flea markets, Cutlery Corner Network. All sorts of places sell these knives. They're all pretty much dirt cheap. They're made in China, and it's just your basic little novelty knife. It looks cool, but how good could it really be? Well, actually, I was actually surprised by how good they could be. This is one I picked up on eBay. This is the 5.5 inch one. Goes 5.5 inches from there to there, so from tip to tip. When you open it up, it's 8 inches from tip to tip. The blade in this is the unbranded one. It just says stainless steel China. But the blade steel in it is basically your 440A stainless, and it came razor sharp. And surprisingly, the liner lock in it is extremely good. It holds it in place really well. Blade has no wobble in it whatsoever, so you got a really good solid knife. It's very well made. It's very heavy, very smooth finish on it. Nice detailing in the feather, so it really looks good. And the liner lock is very strong and very positive. It goes way across and it holds that blade in place. So, all in all, the build of this knife was shockingly good, especially for a $7 novelty knife. I was quite surprised by the quality of it. But what I bought it for was for a craft project. I had planned on removing the Indian heads on the knife, and so when I got the knife, that was my biggest concern, is that, did I just waste $7 because I'm not going to be able to remove that Indian head? Well, it came out that that Indian head was just basically held on with a piece of double stick tape and was easy to pop off. And that was probably the weakest point of this entire knife, was the Indian head that was on there. I didn't like it to begin with, and the fact that it came off easy was actually a bonus for me. Otherwise, it would have been a real problem if it took a while to get off. I had planned on replacing it with buffalo nickels, which I've done. The nickels I'm using are called jewelry grade buffalo nickels. They go for about 35 cents a pop. I actually bought like 13 of them for $2 or something like that on eBay. And you can tell they're jewelry grade because the date is worn off of the nickel. And that's usually the way you can tell is jewelry grade. It's just they're worn down a bit. They're not as good of a quality as a collector grade buffalo nickel, and they're basically used just for crafts. My problem when I got this nickel was that it did not quite fit perfectly into the recesses of the handles, so I basically had to take and slowly grind around the edges until the nickel was the same diameter as the recess. And once I finished doing that part, I then had to take these nickels and sand them down or grind them down until they were almost flush with the recesses so that they'd fit in properly. So it took about a half an hour's worth of work grinding these nickels to get them to fit into the recesses. And then it was just a matter of attaching them using Gorilla Glue, which also worked out real well. So I basically took 70 cents worth of nickels into a $7 knife, so $7.70 to turn a what was once just a novelty knife into more of a conversation piece. And like I said, I was doing this as a potential craft project. This is a little more complicated than what I had hoped for because of all the grinding that was necessary. And so my second plan was to use pennies instead. And the pennies will fit better, but they're just a little bit loose. But for a craft project for scouts or something, you could easily take these 5.5 inch long feather knives and pop out the old Indian heads and put in Indian head pennies, and it'd be a nice project for your Cub Scouts or your Boy Scouts, anyone who's already got their merit badge for knives. And they'd end up with a really cool looking knife that they could carry and use. So that was the plan. I think it's a good plan. So if you've got one of those, if you got some scouts or some Cub Scouts, Girl Scouts, anyone who wants to have a really cool looking knife, consider getting these feather knives and popping off those Indian heads and replacing them with like your Indian head pennies, which you can also get dirt cheap if they're jewelry grade, and you'll end up with a nice little craft project and a really cool knife for your scouts to have. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you again soon.